our objectives for today are to define source documents, explain the required characteristics for source documents in any form, describe requirements of electronic source, focusing primarily on 21 CFR Part 11, and what those requirements mean in a daily practical setting. Again, what do we really look for when we go out to the site? Who is responsible for ensuring the sites actually meet these regulatory requirements? Apply these concepts to electronic medical records at research sites. Implement contingency planning for electronic source document deficiencies. And manage site and sponsor activities regarding electronic medical records. So please share, just so I know again what perspective you're coming from. It would also be helpful to know, are you coming at this from a site perspective, from a sponsor perspective? What is your role? And some challenges you faced with the use of electronic records at sites. So you can go ahead and just chat in your responses, and I'll just give you a moment to do that. And I went in and chatted in one of my own challenges that I've faced in monitoring and managing trials. And I'm looking forward to what you have to say. And it's great to hear from the different groups, so thank you so much for identifying yourself. One of the biggest challenges that I've faced, and that I think is probably very, very commonplace, is ensuring that CRAs actually get access to all of the electronic medical records when they're monitoring. And this fear that if we don't see it, there's going to be a number of things that are not reported. And unfortunately, I think that fear is very legitimate. I've done a few audits very recently at large academic medical centers on a trial that started out as an investigator-initiated study. And then it was picked up by a sponsor, and the sponsor sent out CRAs. And these investigators, some of them were very experienced, have done dozens of trials, and then one investigator had done only one trial as a PI and several as a sub-I. A lot of the findings were the same, that at these institutions they did not allow access to electronic records. The concept of having somebody review while someone else was sitting there watching them, ensuring they had limited access, wasn't something that either site was willing to do time-wise. And while they both claimed that they provided certified copies, they didn't provide complete copies of their records. So during the audit, when I did have them sit with me in an over-the-shoulder view, a number of items were not reported. So as it looks like a lot of my experienced group here, we have a group of auditors on the phone as well, you can imagine that there was missing concomitant therapy, there were missing adverse events, an extensive medical history that was missing. And at one of the institutions, it was the principal investigator who was her own coordinator. So I certainly couldn't say that it was lack of investigator involvement, but it was certainly just lack of adherence to reporting. We didn't have all the information that we needed to ensure the patient complied or that the patient qualified for the study. And in fact, medical history was discovered that could potentially disqualify a subject. So that is probably one of the biggest challenges we're facing, I think, this disconnect in terms of what the sites can allow and what they understand that they should allow and what sponsors actually have access to. And it looks like from our audience, one of the biggest challenges is understanding the regulations that apply towards EMR. And that's certainly muddy water as well, because the FDA has this very rigid set of guidances or set of regulations. They say you must do this, must do that. But as a sponsor, how do we make sure the sites are actually doing that? How do we verify that they have that documentation in place, that they're adhering to that all the systems are password protected? And that one's one of the simple criteria. So we'll touch on that a little bit as we go through this presentation. So the FDA requirements that the PI prepare and maintain adequate and accurate case histories for each individual enrolled in a clinical trial, whether on active treatment or on control. And that's something we're fairly used to. We know that that's expected in clinical trials, that there is adequate source documentation and verification and details on what occurs for each patient, on their medical history, on their concomitant therapy, on their dosing, on who sees them, who does the procedures, what is the timing of that, is there adequate PI involvement. So all of that is part of these case histories. And with these case histories, it's critical that the sites record all observations and data pertinent to the clinical study that are necessary for reconstruction and evaluation of the trial. And these data must be original records or certified copies of the original records. And we'll review the definition of certified copies a little bit further in